Buckeyes Live. Here we are on a Thursday this week. That's why you subscribe and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Typically on Wednesday. Got schedules to organize those. So we're here on Thursday, 1:30 Eastern time, talking Buckeyes football with all of you. So please leave those comments and questions there in the live chat. We've got plenty to get to with Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop up at the top. Steve Hellwagon, of course, from Bucknuts 247 Sports. Kevin Noon, sure to arrive, I'm sure, at some point. Here we go. Tony, this Malik Hartford, he apparently can play some ball, play some safety, and one of the best players in Ohio, and going to be a Buckeye.
Yeah, I believe the number 11 safety in the 24/7 composite, like 6'3", 175 pounds or so, good range. You watch his highlights, and he's comfortable playing the deep safety, but then is also more than comfortable coming up to blow up a screen or support the run. But what I like about him is he does it under control. He can hit, but he's not out of control. He's not just throwing random shoulders at dudes and seeing what happens. He plays under control. I think what his impact next year may be on special teams, because he blocked 6 kicks as a high school junior. That's placements, that's punts. That is he takes it seriously and is very involved with that. And that's really an area for a freshman to find a spot, find a role, as we saw Chris Olave in 2018 with his block punt against Michigan. But there's even clips of him as the long snapper at Lakota West, and then getting down on a punt to make tackles. So he's all in on special teams. He understands the meaning of it. So I think that's also a good sign. But as Jim Knowles has said, the Ohio State defense is a safety-driven defense. So this is another good get for him. Good range. And it is certainly the ideal size for a safety, and he'll continue to add some weight.
Malik Hartford, it's good to see, Steve, another Ohio kid choose the Buckeyes.
Yeah, and also that school, Lakota West, becoming an Ohio State pipeline as well. When you talk about Tegra Tashbola, Jair Brown this past year in the 2022 class, and now you have your first guy from the 23 class from there. And reiterate a lot of what Tony said. Just seems like a big, rangy kid. It's going to make a lot of plays. He had 58 tackles, 2 interceptions. The team was 11-2 this past year. Went to the playoffs, obviously, to the third round of the playoffs. And kid's a winner. He had a lot of offers. I think Alabama was a school that had offered him, Cincinnati, and a ton of others. So I think ranked around 150 or 145 or something like that in the composite. I think nationally, maybe a little bit higher by 24/7, I think. But individually, their network rankings. But in total, just again, can't take enough kids from Ohio that can play football to play at Ohio State. I don't think there's a limit on how many of those type players that you can take. And I think, again, this is a guy that's going to help them going forward, recruiting more and more players. I know that the class in the composite went from number 8 to number 6, I believe, yesterday after they added him into the rankings. So, again, I never get too wrapped up in the class rankings. I just look at it and say it's all going to work out. We just joke every year is a top 5 class regardless. So I don't worry and get too wrapped up about it, but definitely another good player in the fold for Ohio State. When you talk about Malik Hartford there from Lakota West.
Steve, I'm trying to read the weather there in the Columbus area, because I know that I know that you take it outside whenever you can, but then you're all bundled up at the same time.
Yeah, a little bit cold. It's 54 and kind of blowing. I mean, I've been inside working all day, and I got people in there working in my house too. So they're installing a new vanity in one of the bathrooms. So there's some drilling and cutting and different things going on at times. And I may have to move back inside, though. I don't know. They keep putting the sun emoji up on the screen every now and then, but I ain't seen the sun in like 3 damn days or whatever that song was. So,
3 damn days, yeah. Or since I don't know when, Johnny Cash, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm ready. And what'll happen?
Tony would know about that.
Is we're going to go from the 40s and 50s right to 80. We will skip past the 60s and 70s here in Columbus. where we don't even have springtime in Columbus lasts about 2 or 3 days, and then it goes right to summer basically, and May becomes, ungodly hot a lot of times. So yeah, that's the transition we're looking toward right now.
Don't say that, Steve. I'm all good with the 80s, but I still like to enjoy that progression through the 60s and 70s too. It'd be nice to hang on to that for at least a few weeks.
No doubt.
Tony, I don't know that there was a player, at least based on the feedback that I receive here every day talking Buckeyes football and college football across the board, that received as much criticism on this Ohio State football team last year than one Bryson Shaw, who's entered the transfer portal. If you just open up a stat sheet and say, I'm third on the team in tackles, obviously he was out there the whole time, but some of those plays during the Oregon and Michigan games, the Oregon game in particular, not so pretty. But Bryson Shaw, legend Cavazos, have decided to hit the transfer portal.
Yeah, Bryson Shaw is what, Donnie Nicky 2.0, except he didn't have the 4 years as a starter, just the 1 year as a starter. Thrust into a situation last year when Josh Proctor went down that he did his best, but obviously you have some issues, and when you're the last line of defense, that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy. So yeah, he transfers out mid-spring, as does legend Cavazos. I see the super chat from Ryan Dawes. What are the impacts of the two safety transfers? And really, both guys had been passed up by younger players. Even though Bryson Shaw was working with the ones at the boundary safety on Saturday, he's really been passed by Josh Proctor and Court Williams, essentially, and he's going to be competing to be that. He would have been competing to be that third guy. And, he was free safety last year. He gets moved again, as I said, to strong safety. So you've already been moved from one position to another. And now because Jim Knowles, and Steve can answer this when it's his turn. I don't know that Jim Knowles has ever said the two words Bryson Shaw yet since he's been hired to reporters. And so he's talked plenty about Ronnie Hickman. He's talked plenty about Court Williams. He has talked about Josh Proctor. I don't know that he has talked about Bryson Shaw much at all. And so, yeah, Bryson Shaw gets moved to the strong safety spot. The number 2 free safety at this point looks like it's true freshman Kai Stokes behind Ronnie Hickman. So when you've already put a freshman in where you thought you would be, and then you get moved, there's there's plenty of writing on the wall for that. So the impact there, I mean, you lose your number 3 tackler, but he wasn't really going to, I don't think, see much time on defense this year. And then legend Cavazos, very similar situation, was playing corner and then gets passed by 2 second-year guys in Jordan Hancock and J.K. Johnson. And so he gets moved to nickel, where he's at best the third nickel right now behind Tanner McAllister and Cameron Martinez. So another instance of your position was taken from you. You moved to another position and you're behind 2 other guys. And so Ohio State was over the limit. They're still over the limit. So I don't know that Ohio State fought to keep either of those guys from leaving.
Steve, anything on the safety spots in the 2 transfer portal guys?
Yeah, I'll just throw in, I think Bryson Shaw was a good placeholder for them last year. Didn't really have anybody else to really play. I mean, it was them or freshmen last year, and they didn't want to push those freshmen in there too soon. But, just always seemed like, good enough player, but not good enough player in the big games against the best teams, and was exposed several times, taking bad angles and trailing on explosive big plays. And, again, his first taste of playing time, maybe he'll do better somewhere else that is more his speed. I don't know. Best of luck to him. I mean, all he ever did was try to do the best he could. I think that they've got 4 frontline safeties for 3 spots. When you talk about Tanner McAllister, Ronnie Hickman, Josh Proctor, and Court Williams. Court Williams, it didn't appear was healthy at the practice they had over the weekend. He was kind of standing in the back, taking mental reps. And, of course, Josh Proctor is coming back from a tough injury at the beginning of last season, I think an Achilles. So, those 2 are gearing up to be ready for the fall, but McAllister and Hickman are are frontline guys who are practicing this spring. So they're getting plenty of reps and looking pretty good. So I agree with what Tony said. I just don't sense there was a real strong path to playing time. Certainly for Shaw, I think he was fifth best at best at the safety positions. And then Lejon Cavazos, you've got two quality corners, obviously, with Cameron Brown and Burke. And so, as he said, they tried to put him over at nickel to maybe get him a little bit extra work there. I think Ohio State saw him maybe more as a safety than as a corner. I think he views himself more as a corner than a safety and wants to find a place somewhere else where he can maybe play the corner position. So best of luck to him. Maybe there'll be a place closer to his home back in Florida or somewhere where he can get that opportunity, run the gamut from, Miami, Florida, Florida State, South Florida, Central Florida, down to Florida Atlantic. Maybe one of those schools or, somebody down that way would be perfect for him. But best of luck to him. Great Buckeye as well. Did everything that he was asked to do. Just, didn't work out for one way or another. And that's the way it works. Still 3 scholarships over on the 85-man limit. And I don't think they'll have a problem, obviously, getting to 85 or under that by the fall.
Ryan, we appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much for that. Kevin's here too, and we're actually going to let him talk.
Noon.
Don't make me leave. Don't make me leave. I assume I know what the question was about. I don't want to repeat a lot of points there. One thing I will say is while Legend Cavazos did go to IMG Academies originally from San Antonio, so I don't think that he necessarily has to just kind of limit his look within the Sunshine State. I think he could maybe look in the state of Texas. I think that there's some options there. Steve was exactly right in terms of the point of safety corner. He only picked up corner kind of late in terms of when he moved to IMG. He was a safety prior. Obviously, you look at corner and you look at the money that corners command, and guys want to be corners. Guys, that's just the way that situation is. It just happens. I mean, you get over the 85 and you're going to have to sit there and have hard conversations with guys. And while nobody wants to sit there and say, oh, this guy was driven out or that guy was driven out, guys are going to have very honest and frank conversations and say, look, you're in year 3 in the program and you're on the 4th team at this point. And, what do you want to do about it? So, best of luck to Bryson Shaw. Best of luck to Legend Cavazos. We're going to be talking about at least 3 more names between now and whether it's summer or start of fall. Whenever that hard limit kicks in, we're going to have to, those conversations are going to have to be there in terms of getting down to the 85. And it's just, it's a business. It's show business, not show friends.
I always thought that was funny. Is there any shame in being a starting safety in the NFL, making $7 or $8 million a year, or for the player that has to face the harsh reality? You're not a shortstop. You're a second baseman. Again, you're starting second baseman in the major leagues. Is there anything wrong with this? But
you run into instances where guys like look at I don't know. Look at Reed Fragel. Reed Fragel wanted to be a tight end in the worst way. He was an offensive tackle. And he could have made a lot more money. By making that move sooner in his career, and it just kind of happens. You get sold a bill of goods to yourself that you think that you're this position and not that position. It's first world problems for sure. Whether or not you're making $6 million, you're making $13 million. Those are tax brackets I have nothing in common with.
Well, look at Sean Wade wanting to show that he could play outside corner, and look at what happened when he showed what he could do. And sure, he was a first-team All-American, but I think everybody watching him saw he was better in the slot than he was outside. And he ends up with, 5th-round draft pick eventually after being considered a top 10 pick coming into the season. So a lot of times, ego can get in there, but there is also the whole business aspect of it. That's you see yourself having that money, and a right tackle wants to be a left tackle, and defensive tackle. Some think, I could play defensive end in high school. They want to stay outside, and it's like, no, you're too slow. You're gonna have to move inside, and it's the process of, I guess, water finding its level in sports.
And I say I don't understand it. Of course I do. These guys have pride. They reached that level because of their athletic skill, but also because they've got egos and they think they're the best, and that there's a confidence factor there. You don't want to be told you're too slow or you're not this or you're not that. Kevin, at the same time, looking at this safety position, and this may be a bit of a leap for the optimistic Ohio State fan, but if a guy like Bryson Shaw is a starting safety one year and he can't even get mentioned in the rotation the next year, the A to B thought is that this defense must be a lot better.
Well, you have somebody new in charge who has, his ideas of what each position needs to be. So, it's somebody could work very well in one system and not work well in another system. And with Ohio State going to the 4-2-5, a 3 safety type of system with what Jim Knowles wants to employ, yeah, I think you can make both. You can leap to both conclusions at that point, that maybe it was a case of that the defense wasn't very good last year, but it's also a case of they're just going to be looking for different types of people to be in certain roles. So, they could have been, I mean, you're not going to be completely blowing up the defense if the defense wasn't substandard the year prior. I mean, that's just, that how that's going to work. But, I don't know if I would sit there and say it's solely a case of that you can just go to that and say, well, that's why the defense was bad. No, the defense was bad last year because the defense was bad. I mean, I don't need to see Bryson Shaw moving on to another program to come to that conclusion. I watched all those games last year. I saw them give up 45 to Utah. I was just rewatching that game last week just for trying to get something put together on a piece coming up here soon. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting.
Well, CJ Stroud said himself yesterday that this defense is more difficult to face than last year's defense, and you don't know what you're going to get from look to look, as opposed to knowing last year and years before that what the pre-snap read was, and that there was no change post-snap, and so made it a lot easier on CJ Stroud last year. So imagine it made it much easier for the rest of the opponents as well. And now things are different, and that's a testament to the scheme, obviously, but I think just more focused on making life difficult for the offense and having more options. As Steve said, Bryson Shaw was the only option basically last year. They moved Ryan Watts from corner to see if he could get involved. They didn't like Lathan Ransom there. They didn't like Court Williams there. Obviously, you couldn't put a freshman there. So it was also, I guess, a recruiting issue as well when you don't have the depth there. And they were so reliant on Josh Proctor in that single high defense that once he was gone, they basically had to change everything because he was the only one that could do that. And when so much of your defense is hinging on one guy, you got to be careful with that. And we talked in the past about how important Jordan Fuller was to that defense, and replacing him was going to be key. And you saw they couldn't replace him, and so they had to change everything.
Talking Buckeyes football with all of you each and every week, typically on Wednesday, but that's why you hit that bell for the notifications once you've subscribed to know when we're going to go live. Thursday this week, 1:30 Eastern time. All right. Before we move on from Malik Hartford, Kevin, we hit on the safety that committed to the Buckeyes. Just wanted to get your take if there was anything there, if you've seen him, have any thoughts about his abilities.
Yeah, he's somebody who wouldn't look at special teams as being some sort of punishment or proving grounds. A guy with 6 block kicks. He is going to be a really good one. Smart kid, 4.2 GPA, already taking college level courses there at Lakota West. When in high school, I don't know if I could count up to 4.2. They've already got a great foundation in terms of safety at this point with him and Cedric Hawkins already committed. Could they potentially take 5 safeties this year when you're playing 3 of them, and just with some depth issues that they've had and maybe some guys that haven't necessarily panned out? I mean, I think that this could be a really good class, and I think that Malik Hartford can definitely hold his own with anybody in that class. So, I've seen him ranked anywhere from 2nd to 5th in terms of state of Ohio rankings. I think he's definitely one of the best players in the state of Ohio, and it was very critical for them to keep him in state. He credited the addition of Perry Aliano. I still think Malik Hartford would have ended up at Ohio State without Perry Aliano ending up on the Ohio State staff. But once that happened, it was a foregone conclusion in my book.
Steve, you made it out to practice last Saturday, and I understand you had a better vantage point than you typically do.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was the Student Appreciation Day practice, and they told us that we would be able as media to hang out and watch the whole practice, and they didn't give us any kind of restrictions in terms of what we could photograph, what we could film. So we went to it. I heard one of the sites talked about how 3 years ago was the last time that we got to go to that because of COVID. They didn't have it the last 2 years. They didn't have students come in and watch practice because of COVID the last 2 years. Well, 3 years ago, they had some restrictions on it, and those guys had like 3 minutes of them stretching and those kind of things, like what we usually get at a practice. And from this practice this past weekend, they had over 20 minutes of video. I think we had about 10 minutes ourselves on Bucknuts that we were able to chop up and parcel out, including some really good 11 on 11 stuff. And what was the most interesting and neatest thing about it was there were only about 500 or 600 students, where ordinarily it's over 1,000 that show up for this thing. So us as the media were able to kind of get right up behind the students where they were, their vantage point, and stand there and get some incredible video. So they set up an 11 on 11 segment where they were going from the 50-yard line toward the end zone, and they allowed the students to come in right behind them, maybe at the 40-yard line. And so we're standing right behind them, at the 39-yard line. We are, as CJ Stroud takes his drop, not more than 6 or 7 yards behind him. And here come the defensive ends. Like, we are seeing, and we have it in our video, everything that he is seeing as he's looking downfield. And I got to tell you, this is not access that we've had. I just laugh. This is not access that we've had at Ohio State in a very, very long time. To be basically, the players are usually in a huddle right behind getting mental reps. They had pushed them off to the sideline, like it was a normal football game, and the students got to sit right behind and everything else. So we were truly in the pocket with CJ Stroud, watching him throw the ball downfield. And it was a remarkable day. He was sharp as heck. Kyle McCord looked good. Devin Brown, the true freshman, got in there and mixed things up and was completing throws. There was not one interception that I recall, either in 7-on-7 or 11-on-11. And usually you have a couple of those in a given practice. And I didn't recall seeing any, maybe a tip pass or whatever. You'd say, was the coverage terrible? Well, no, I wouldn't necessarily say that either, because they got their hands on some balls and knocked them away just as well too. They made a few plays, but when you're going up against the likes of Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, those guys were making plays. Julian Fleming was making plays. What caught my eye was a couple of the true freshmen, Kion Grays and Jared Burton, two freshman wide receivers, were repping, and CJ Stroud was throwing the ball to them like he'd worked with them forever. So I thought that was a good sign that those true freshmen were getting involved. And then later on, Devin Brown got an opportunity to throw as well in a segment against the threes, and he threw a deep ball to Kion Stokes, who outran the secondary, maybe a walk-on or a third-team kid, and got behind the secondary and made a big play on a bomb, and all the students celebrated that. So it was a good day, and the only other thing I'll just throw in is it looked to me like the pass rush is going to be much improved. I thought the true freshman Caden Curry mixed right in and did pretty well. JT Tuimalau, Jack Sawyer, all looked good. Zach Harrison didn't practice all that much because of an injury. So you had, and up the middle, you had Michael Hall defensive tackle who only played a little bit this past year. He also made a few plays as well. So I think the pass rush is going to be improved, although Ryan Day, when we talked to him on Monday, said some of that was part and parcel, that they had 2 or 3 backup offensive linemen, like a Trey LaRue, maybe Ben Crispin, and maybe one other one who were out with injuries. So they were going with more walk-ons and true freshmen in the 2 deep behind the 5 starters who were all fine. So that may have been why it looked a little bit more in terms of the defense in that regard. But overall, just a red letter day to be out there watching the team practice.
Yakov 22 doesn't care about any of that. He wants to know, Steve, if you're related to Terry Bradshaw.
Some of the questions that Yakov comes up with, he wants to know if I saw Red Grange one time, and he comes up with all these different questions. I don't know. I'm not related to Terry Bradshaw, but I have to say, as a young 9 or 10-year-old, I did get very excited the day Joe Turkey Jones took him, turned him, and dumped him directly on his head. I thought that was really awesome.
I once sat in the back of a limousine with Terry Bradshaw. No, I didn't spend my childhood riding in limousines by any stretch of the imagination. Terry Bradshaw spoke at our church. And actually, I was a huge Cowboys fan. I couldn't stand Terry Bradshaw or the Steelers. And they had just beaten the Cowboys in the Super Bowl. And but my mom, all she knew is I liked football. So she went and bless her heart, she tugged on the pastor's coattails and was like, hey, my son really wants to meet Terry Bradshaw. So before he took off, they led me out there and I got to jump in the back seat of the limo and say hi. And who knows what came out of my mouth after that. Maybe I was, running down his stats line from the previous season. I don't know.
My brother was a Steelers fan. So I was a Terry Bradshaw fan. Mostly, though, because I was a Cannonball Run fan. And, Terry Bradshaw was one of the many, 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 many stars of the Cannonball Run franchise.
Jerry Reed. Who else did they throw through that gamut? Of course, Jackie Gleason.
Mel Tillis was in there.
Yes.
Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise.
Absolutely.
Jackie Chan.
Had a small role in there. Yeah, that was like one of his first American roles. I mean, he didn't speak a word of English in it, but I think there'll be a lot of people would say that he's still struggling with that in a lot of his movies. Jamie
Farr, maybe Cannonball Run 2. I don't know. It all blends together. Really, it should just be one 4-hour adventure.
Sally Field.
Yeah.
All right, everyone.
No. That's Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh, Smokey and the Bandit. Yeah, I mixed up.
I was going to say, we're going to mix our metaphors
about that. The Trans Am. Yeah, my bad.
Cannonball Run. It was Shirley MacLaine. Cannonball Run 2, and the lady from Taxi. But that's another. We could talk about this off the show.
I did screw that up, didn't I? That's where I got Jerry Reed.
Yeah.
I think from.
And Jackie Gleason. I let the first two go.
I went the full route on Smokey and the Bandit. I was all in.
I mean, Dom DeLuise, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Roger Moore was in there, Peter Fonda. I mean, it was an all-star cast.
Absolutely.
10-year-old Kevin was all about that movie because it was just naughty enough that my parents didn't want me to watch it, and I had a cool that I was able to go watch it over at their place.
You know what probably shows most of our age is that I'm guessing, depending on who's here in the chat today, I come across this all the time where about a majority of these people are like, don't even know who these A-list superstars are from 4 decades ago. I was actually having a conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago. Somebody who's not that young that was watching a movie. I didn't know the movie reference. I looked it up. And they were telling me all these actors and actresses in the movie. I didn't know any of them. But then I discovered that Robert Redford, this was one of his last movies. And I said, Robert Redford was in this movie. Who? Who's that? Okay. Anyway, on to Sad Buckeyes. Sad Buckeyes, I got to say that either the most pessimistic Buckeyes fan in the history of civilization or a troll. It's got to be one or the other.
Option 2.
Oh my goodness. Ryan Day can't coach, still lamenting the Oregon game. And of course, now Michigan has taken over the Big Ten. Okay.
Yeah, Sad Buckeye was on our live feed from the Malik Hartford announcement, and really was the only person on there that didn't feel very good about Ohio State's chances. So I'm thinking it's a bit.
Well done, said Buckeye. You got your 15 seconds of fame. There you go. All right. You guys got to hear from the quarterbacks and linebackers the other day this week. Tony, I guess we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's always interesting to listen to CJ Stroud, who has come a long way, and his understanding of the offense. And I came away from listening to him just thinking like he's a complete football guy. Like he loves talking about it. He loves talking about it with coaches. He loves talking about it with other players. And he's very, very serious about it, and conveys that, and then also conveys that to his teammates on the practice field. And they see that leadership. And one of the interesting aspects was, he's got a lot of NIL money, but he said that because he's the baby of 5 kids, like he has been kept humble by his older siblings. And if any of the younger, the babies of the family are out there, they understand exactly what that means. Your brothers and sisters, older brothers and sisters, have a great way of keeping you humble and grounded. And there were times where Steve and Kevin, you guys you talked to Troy Smith back in the day, and there's this aura of I'm Troy Smith. Like I don't think you really get that from CJ Stroud, who is he's not the cocky guy yet, and now he's a confident guy, but he's also still talking. He talks about how he's constantly progressing and learning. Like he knows he's not a finished product. I don't think he thinks he'll ever be a finished product. And that's when you know you've got something good on your hands.
Yeah, I was actually at interviews one day when Troy Smith turned to John Spencer, who'd been covering the team for about 20 years already at that point, and said, "Are you new?" Something like that. And, just he always had kind of a chip on his shoulder. You don't sense that with CJ Stroud. I think he will play the underdog card at times. I've heard him say, nobody expected us to do this or whatever. I have news for him. They're either number 1 or number 2 in every poll going into 2022. And he'll be either number 1 or number 2 on every Heisman list, along with the incumbent Heisman winner, Young. So, yes, everyone's expecting you to be there in the championship game at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles next January, CJ. So no underdog chip for you this year, 2022. So I don't know what you're going to, that's the only time where he kind of cops just a little bit of an attitude. Otherwise, he's pretty humble about the way he approaches things. He was he used to be kind of reserved almost in his comments. When he would talk to the media, he got on a downhill roll for about 20 minutes yesterday, and they just let him riff, which was good. I think that was great to see a lot of his personality. And at about the 8-minute mark, he was asked about Devin Brown. I know this because I referenced it for a note that we put on our site, what he thought about Devin Brown. He said he's been tremendously impressed with the true freshman, what he's seen out of him after 3 weeks of practices on the field, basically like 10 practice sessions. He's been very impressed with him, and even glossed him, quote, as a future Buckeye great. Those were his words that he sees for Devin Brown. Says he has above average ability to run the ball as well, and can really spin it. So again, we only saw some of that on Saturday. He had a few reps here and there, and he did really well. But for CJ to say that about one of his understudies, and that wasn't to take anything away from Kyle McCord either. Kyle McCord was really good too. I have not spent the time to go back and watch and listen to everything that he had to say, but Brown, impressive. All 3 of those guys, impressive. I think if you ask me today, I would say you've got 3 of the top 10 or 12 quarterbacks in the Big Ten at Ohio State this year. That's my feeling going into the year.
Who is C.J. Stroud to judge quarterback mobility? I mean, bump. Let me get past that. But I think one of the big things that's going to help too is C.J. Stroud, a year older and a year more confident in terms of being that on-field leader. And we talk every year once we get into spring and summer, as we don't have as much X's and O's to go through. We love to go into who will be the leaders on this team, and it always has to be your quarterback. Your quarterback's got to be that guy, and they're the quarterbacks who lead by example, and then they're the quarterbacks who lead by with their words. And I think C.J. Stroud really has a position to be all of that, and I think that that's really going to be part of where Ohio State's success is going to, where the genesis of that's going to be from. Sure, you have talented players and everything there, but sometimes I think that when things got tough last year, Oregon, Michigan, maybe they didn't have as much of that leadership there, and I think that this is going to be a very good year in terms of leadership, and CJ Stroud is going to be instrumental.
A dog named Brutus reminding everyone to like and subscribe. We appreciate that. And also Ryan chipping in. We appreciate your contribution, Ryan. Can the running back surpass 2,500 yards this season from the shadow of the passing game? You got to start to kind of do some numbers crunching, because there's only so many possessions to gain yards and points and all that, because this offense should be off the charts. But Tony, what do you think about 2,500 yards in the rushing game?
Yeah, I think that's very doable. I would be pretty surprised if you don't see Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson combined for 2,000 between the two of them. Does that mean Evan Pryor has to get the last 500? The 2018 team rushed for 2,400 yards, and they couldn't run the ball all that well. And I think what you need the 14 games or the 15 games would certainly help. Last year they didn't 2,300 yards in 13 games. They would have gotten there obviously with that 14th game. So yeah, I think they're going to be a better running team this year. For one, Travion Henderson's a year older, a year better, a year more experienced. Mayan Williams is still just as good as ever, probably obviously should say better than ever. And Evan Pryor growing into his role. So I think I think 2,500 is a fair number. And does it just have to be the running backs? Then maybe it's 2,400. But I think you're going to see some good stuff from the running backs. And they do want to establish the run. That makes the passing that much easier. And let's not forget, we all expect the passing game to be great, but you lose Garrett Wilson, you lose Chris Olave. It's okay if you take a little bit of a step back in the passing game.
Yeah, I think 2,500 is a safe bet. Again, you look at C.J. Stroud, who had net minus 20 yards right there. Kyle McCord had net minus 16. There wasn't necessarily a case of, all right, Garrett Wilson had 76 rushing yards, but there weren't a lot of guys that had any sort of numbers that were not running backs. They were just shy of 5,000 passing yards. They've talked about wanting to see a little bit more balance. That doesn't necessarily mean, when we talk about balance, and you would have Urban Meyer, who wanted 250 and 250 running and passing. Well, days of 500 yards of total offense, a little bit behind us at this point. So maybe 300 might be a little bit more realistic at that point. It's not. I think when you talk about the balance, it's a number of runs called versus a number of throws, more so than saying, well, we're a little bit ahead on the passing. We need 75 more rushing yards. No, that's not necessarily. We dialed that run up to go exactly 17 yards. So it doesn't work that way. But I think 2,500 is very doable with a year older Travion Henderson, and then obviously with Mayan Williams, and then whatever they get out of everybody else there.
We didn't get to see a lot of the running game on Saturday. We didn't get to see the inside drill and how much they work on running game. The defense did a pretty good job when they did try to run the ball, stacking things up. And Henderson, I don't recall if he even ran the ball at all the entire time we were there. So I don't know what to make of that. But I think that what I was told when we were sitting there afterwards, one of the graduate assistants came by and just kind of off the cuff said that Travion Henderson can still play football. Maybe that was just a nod before we got there. He did some amazing things. I don't know, but so I'm looking for him to have a pretty good year, maybe in that 12 to 1500 range. And I think Mayan Williams is also going to be right up there in the high, 800, 900 range maybe. And then Evan Pryor, to me, has got the ability to do anything he wants to do. I think he's got just some innate ability as well. And so I'm interested in seeing when he mixes in what it looks like. And, if he gets in there late in games, there's no reason why he can't pluck off 50 or 60 yards, in a late game assignment. So to me, I think they've got plenty of guys that can handle it. Crowley may come back from injury and finally make an impact as well. And then, will they involve some of the receivers in the running game? We watch them take end around handoffs quite a bit. So maybe they're going to incorporate some of that in what they're doing as well. But I don't think they're going to have any problem running the football. And I don't think CJ Stroud's going to be too involved in that either.
I just want to address a couple of things here in the comments. A dog named Brutus saying, please, Day isn't committed to not running the ball. Maybe Day isn't committed to running the ball. Day has been the OC since 2017. In the 3 years that Ryan Day has been the head coach, Ohio State has led the Big Ten in rushing in 2 of those years, his first 2 years, by a wide margin, like over 30 yards the first year, over 50 yards the second year. Last year, obviously, didn't go as planned in the running game, but they were able to throw the ball. And then to address Sad Buckeye again, laughing at the thought of Ohio State putting up 500 yards of total offense a game. Maybe that he has revealed himself as a Michigan fan at this point, because 500 yards of total offense for Michigan is very rare. But for Ohio State, they've been averaging over 500 yards of total offense for, about the last 6 or 7 seasons. As I'm just scrolling through here to find the last time they didn't, it was 2016 was the last time they were under 500 yards of total offense a game, and they were at 459. And so you see, basically since Ryan Day has come along, the yardage is pretty significant, and the offense has been pretty good.
And those total offensive numbers are a huge indicator. They certainly tell us a lot. But Travion Henderson, 3rd and 2 the first drive of the second half against Michigan? Is that what they ran it 3 consecutive times and they gained a little bit of yardage and they were in position there while Hassan Haskins on the other side? I don't even know if they got to 3rd down in the second half, but he kept converting those. So convert those against the good teams. That's the step in the right direction I would like to see. But the offensive numbers are going to be impressive. We would all be shocked if they're not. But it all starts with the offensive line. David had asked about, basically had made the statement, how we see the offensive line past the starters. He's comfortable with the starters, not so comfortable with the complete rotation.
Join the club. I think Ohio State's and the coaches are in your same boat. Right now, the 6th guy is probably Enoch Vamahi. Josh Fryer would be in that consideration as well, except he's out for the spring. So behind that top 6, good luck. You guys can throw some guesses out, but Jacob James has been in there. They want to see some of these young guys. Zen Mahalski, Kevin Wilson talked about him like the first time he spoke with reporters this spring, but I haven't seen necessarily much from him. And you've got Ben Crispin, you've got Trey LaRue, all of these guys that they brought in over the last few years that need to start stepping up. And right now, the depth at offensive line, I think for me, is a huge concern past that 7th guy. I expect Josh Fryer to be that 7th guy, and they'll be fine. And they've got a versatile group that can, Enoch Vamahi and Josh Fryer have both played guard and tackle. So basically, anybody who gets hurt in that top 5 in that starting group, if somebody were to get hurt, they have pieces that can move. Say Luke Whippler gets hurt, Matt Jones just slides to center, and he's the number 2 guy there. And they've got versatility. Paris Johnson, we know, can play guard if need be. Donovan Jackson can play tackle if need be. He's the number 2 left tackle at this point, even though he's your starting left guard. Kind of gives you an idea of the lack of depth right now for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, you mentioned Mikowski. He's in Machowski, or however it's pronounced. He was another one of those guys who missed the practice on Saturday, because in my chat on Monday, I was asked specifically about Chrisman, LaRue, and Machowski, and none of the 3 of them, from my understanding, were out there. I published my 2 deep. Really was a 3 deep based on what I saw. And if you guys want to vamp for a moment, I'll see if I can dig that up and share what I saw. But
Tony tried.
Vamp, Kevin.
Actually, I found it. It was the left tackle is Paris Johnson. The left guard's Donovan Jackson. Luke Whippler at center. Matthew Jones right guard, and DeJuan Jones at right tackle. The backup left tackle was George Fitzpatrick, a true freshman, which is very telling, obviously, with what I think that would be Fryer, the guy that Tony referenced, who's out this spring with an injury. But good to see George Fitzpatrick at least getting quality reps. Donovan Jackson has also moved outside and rep some at left tackle. Toby Wilson, the son of Kevin Wilson, is kind of a backup center, but also a backup at left guard. Jacob James was next up at center. Enoch Vamahi was next up at right guard. And Grant Toutant was next at right tackle. And that's it. Those were all of the scholarship players, and Wilson's not even a scholarship player to my knowledge at this point. Those were all the available scholarship players. So when you take Harry Miller out of that mix, as they did, he was counted on to either be a starter or provide a modicum of depth. Some of that's gone now. So they've got a lot of development on their hands with Toutant, Vamahi, although he's a little bit of a veteran but has not played much, Jacob James, George Fitzpatrick, and then the 3 guys we were talking about with Machowski, LaRue, and whoever the other guy is that I'm airmailing right now. But those 6 or 7 remaining scholarship players need to provide that depth along with Fryer once he's healthy.
There were too many misses in offensive line recruiting through the years, and now you have a new offensive line coach. And that's not, I'm not taking anything individually and saying, oh, this guy's no good and that guy's no good. That's not how I roll. I'm not going to do that, but they certainly were not landing their first choices at a lot of the positions. And you now have a lot of guys that are going to have to kind of put up or shut up that, were 2 and 3 year projects. Well, guess what? That note is due now. They're in their second and third years, and they're going to need that depth. I mean, Ohio State's going to have one of the best offensive lines out there in terms of 1 through 5, 1 through 6. You generally are not having to get too much deeper than that, but you never know. So, one of the big benefits they had last year is they had just a ton of depth. Well, you lose that ton of depth with 2 guys off to the draft and 1 guy medically retiring and everything that you have there, and even some other other departures. So it's they're going to need a lot in terms of that development. It'll be interesting to see what Justin Fry is able to do in year 1, and if 1, 2, 3 of these guys are going to be able to have that light bulb go off and prove to be somebody who is Big Ten caliber ready. And then they're just going to have to do a much better job in terms of recruiting, because you look at the class that's coming in. Sure, you got George Fitzpatrick, you've got Carson Hiddensman, you've got Tegra Shabola, you got Avery Henry out of St. Henry, or Avery Henry out of St. Clairsville.
Yeah.
Space there for a second. He's a project. He's going to be a project. He may be somebody in 2 years that we're raving about, and he's the next DeJuan Jones in terms of we weren't sure what to expect there, but he's doing all this, but you don't know. They're going to have to do a lot better when you sit there and you let somebody like Blake Miller escape the state of Ohio and go to Clemson on the heels of letting Jackson Carman and some other guys escape and do the same thing. You get what you get.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this was served up sometime. I do way too many of these to keep track of when it was, but some caller asked, when is the last time one team in the nation had the best quarterback, wide receiver, running back? Well, my initial response was, who determines who's the best quarterback, who's the best running back, who's the best wide receiver? It's a rarity that you can definitely say he's the best and nobody's close to him. But where it's under consideration. So David's asking, hey, Ohio State's got the best quarterback, wide receiver, running back in the country. What do you guys think?
Well, I think running back's open to interpretation. I think Henderson's one of the top 4 or 6 running backs in the country. There's a lot of good ones. I think quarterback, it's between Stroud and Young. I think wide receiver, it's Jackson Smith and the Jigba with his Rose Bowl performance. I don't think anybody living or dead has had had that kind of a game or that kind of an impact on a game. And without having to split the balls with Wilson and Olave, I mean, just what is going to be possible for him this year? He's going to break probably every Ohio State single season record for catches, yards, and touchdowns, I would think. He's going to break all 3 of those if he's healthy and if Stroud remains healthy. So I think he's top, and I don't even know who the other top receivers are, but I think Stroud and Smith the Jigba are in the top 2 at their position in the country, just as a guess. And then Henderson's in the top 6, but you got to play up to that level too to earn that. Alabama obviously has had years where they've had an All-American quarterback or an All-American running back and wide receiver at the same time. And I guess that's what you're aspiring to, is to have the first team All-American quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. Usually they pick 2 running backs and they pick 2 wide receivers for the first team. So, if you can get guys on that team, that first team, then you can lay claim to that. But it's all subjective. I mean, numbers wise, what's it all mean? But I'm interested to see how it all comes down, because I think they're going to push the envelope. I don't have any doubt about that.
I'm trying to think of, like, just in terms of Ohio State trios. You had 95 with Bobby Hoying and Eddie George and Terry Glenn, where Eddie George won the Heisman, Terry Glenn won the Biletnikoff. Bobby Hoying won what did he win the Nerd Heisman in terms of the scholar?
Yes.
Whatever it was. It's changed its name a couple of times.
Yeah, George won the Heisman and everything else, and Terry Glenn was the Biletnikoff. So in that one year, you had the top running back and the top wide receiver on the same team.
2006 with Troy and Ted Ginn, even though he topped out at like 800 or 900 yards receiving, but Antonio Pittman was the starter there, so he wasn't the best in the nation, maybe the most underrated. I don't know what has your research told you, Mark? Did you look into it? Did you try to figure it out?
I did not look into it. I started the question was brought to me overall in college football, and I started thinking of Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, and Mike Williams or Dwayne Jarrett on that team. Yeah. Just a couple of years ago, Mac Jones, Najee Harris, and Devontae Smith. You can make an argument there. There's been a few others. Who else popped up? We came up with a few others, but
LSU in 2019 has an argument maybe with Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, he wouldn't necessarily be the best running back, but yeah, in the vicinity. Yep.
I think I'm not going to be surprised if Travion Henderson ends up being the best running back, however you quantify that this year. I don't, 2019 you had Justin Fields and J.K. Dobbins and Chris Olave. I mean, but that's still not,
Well, the subjectiveness is real because there's not. I mean, what is your measurement, and even using the national awards for winning the O'Brien and the Bolitnikoff or whatever, those things are not always very accurate in terms of what we see there. I mean, look at the Bolitnikoff voting last year for top receiver, and neither of none of the three Ohio State receivers, made it to the final round, the swimsuit competition or whatever of the Bolitnikoff. So it goes to show that what is your metric? I mean, is it going to be for a quarterback? Is it going to be yardage or passing percentage or touchdowns or touchdown to interception ratio or wins? I mean, how do you determine all this? But to kind of echo Steve, I do agree that CJ Stroud is probably among the top two at quarterback. I mean, guys always end up emerging, and guys sometimes aren't able to hang tight the next year. Wide receiver, I have a hard time finding somebody better than Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think the one that I really kind of have my question mark about is going to be running back. But again, is that going to be a yardage award or whatever? I mean, I don't know. And I mean, some, better teams are going to have more depth, and you're not going to have to sit there and take as much tread off the tires of your running back. So, I mean, if you're an Ohio State fan, while you want to see Trevion Henderson put up big numbers, I don't think you want to see him playing into the fourth quarter of a lot of games. The goal is to sit there and have a very long season. And if you play 12 regular season games, a conference championship game, and 2 more games in the college football playoff, that's 15 games. So let's spread those carries out over 15 games rather than 12.
Yeah, the rushing champ, the wide receiver leader in terms of yardage, is typically not the best player. Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Justin Ross come to mind as a bit of an argument. All right, quick super chat to get in here. We appreciate it. Cameron, how much did instability on defense and other distractions impact Ryan Day? The play caller last year seems to have less on his plate this year.
Well, he did complain that he fashions himself as, yes, the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, but thinks if this thing's really running well, I've got a guy over there running the defense, and my words, not his exactly, I don't have to worry about defense, and I can just concentrate on calling great offense, which I think the purists among us would say, excuse me, bro, you are the head coach of the entire team. Everything part and parcel of that comes back on you. And there's a lot of hindsight 2020 second guessing here. When they got stomped by Alabama, 52 points and 600 yards in that national championship game, why didn't he pull the plug on Kerry Combs after that, if Kerry Combs was the problem, or the direction Kerry Combs was taking the thing? Why didn't they pull the plug and make the changes that they needed to make at that time? And one of the arguments I had was, well, you did make the national championship game, as bad as the defense was, and you run the risk if you uproot in midstream and try to rebuild your defense, maybe you run the risk of not making the playoff or winning the Big Ten the following year, which he kept status quo, and they didn't win the Big Ten and they didn't make the playoffs. So I don't know. He is the head coach, and I think when he made those comments, I think he lost a little bit of sight of that, and almost was in some regard making a excuse for how it went sideways on him, and not taking ownership perhaps of the fact that he made the decision ultimately to go status quo. So now he's got a guy that he feels he can rely on in Jim Knowles, and everything so far has been hunky-dory with Jim Knowles, Tim Walton, Perry Eliano, Larry Johnson. Everything seems to be going pretty well, and so we'll see this fall if it all comes out of the wash and they win the games they're supposed to win and get to the playoff and win the Big Ten. That's when we'll know whether the proof's in the pudding or not.
Yeah, I mean, I sure you're going to have to put thought into what's wrong with his defense. I mean, he will have less on his plate this year, but you as a head coach, you better be able to multitask. I mean, hell, in our just everyday normal jobs, we all are being asked to multitask. So, you would sit there and think somebody making $7 million a year would be able to multitask. I certainly would hope that it wouldn't affect him in terms of being a play caller. I mean, there is something to be said about maximum bandwidth, and at some point, something's got to give. But I certainly wouldn't see it being his play calling duties or anything there. But as Steve said, and as Ryan has said, he has his defensive head coach in Jim Knowles, and it doesn't mean that he's going to be derelict on his duties as a head coach of checking in and being aware of the defense. But you've got somebody who's got all of the accountability over there. They've made some huge changes. So I don't know if I would sit there and say that play calling would be something that suffered, but something's got to give.
If you guys have a minute or two, we got a super chat coming in. We appreciate that, Darnell, as well. Why does Ohio State start linebackers that are slow and can't follow running backs out of the backfield?
Apparently they recruit linebackers that are slow and can't follow running backs out of the backfield because you have to play who you've got. You can't make trades. You can't trade in season. You can't sit there and do that. So you got who you got. So it's an evaluation situation, or maybe they just were targeting the wrong players, missing out. I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to sit there and say that I'm 100% in agreement of saying that they're slow and can't follow running backs out of the backfield. I mean, everybody's going to want to sit there and pick on poor Tough Borland for a play that we're all going to remember for the rest of our lives against Alabama, where they, Steve Sarkisian schemed up Ohio State, schemed them into oblivion on that play. I mean, situations happen there. I mean, linebacker recruiting, save, getting guys like CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers, and I still believe Powers may end up sliding down to line. You're only going to be able, you can only play who you've got there. So they need to recruit better. And this, this isn't I'm not putting this at the feet necessarily of Al Washington, who was the linebacker coach up until the changes were made, but I don't know if they necessarily were going out and getting the guys that were necessarily the right fits. But good news, Darnell, they're only going to have 2 linebackers out there now most of the time, except for when they're going against 12 personnel, and we'll have to put a Sam out on the field.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin. I think a lot of it was a function of recruiting. I mean, Ryan Shazier, Raekwon McMillan haven't been walking through that door at Ohio State in recent years. And those are just 2 examples, not even a Jerome Baker, caliber type guy, who could do everything at linebacker. You're hoping they get back to that level of play here in the next year or two. It says a lot when Steel Chambers is a running back at the beginning of preseason camp and they move him over to linebacker and he ends up being the best linebacker on the team. That kind of tells you everything you need to know about what a clown show. Urban Meyer talked about how the wide receiver group that he inherited from Luke Fickell, Urban Meyer, in the early 2010s was a clown show, and that they whipped him into shape eventually, and they became a great unit and won a national championship. Well, to me, the linebacker unit in some regards has been a clown show, so they got to get that figured out, obviously.
135 on the line. Unfortunately, most of you jumped on in the last 10 minutes or so. So we appreciate you being here. Just wait for the video to post. You'll hear the analysis from Kevin, Steve, and Tony. Full throttle, start to finish. We had a ton of stuff going on with personnel moves this week. So check it out. Just wait for the video to post. We appreciate you being here. Tony, I'm calling for a guy that's not even here. Kevin. Kevin's here. Where can everybody find you?
Yeah, you can find me on social on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. You can, of course, find me as well at BuckeyesScoop.com. And you can find my podcast on all of the great podcasting outlets, YouTube, et cetera, the Big Meat Kickoff. Tomorrow we are dropping one where we talk to an NFL draft expert about all things draft related. Look for that sometime around 10 o'clock in the morning.
Steve.
Just bucknuts.com and Steve Hellwagon on Twitter. And just very excited about wrapping up the spring with the spring game next week. Going to be doing some more interviews tomorrow with players. So look for those on bucknuts.com. And I know that Pat Murphy from our staff put up a great interview with Devin Brown that was conducted yesterday, the true freshman. And I think he's going to be a pretty good one for him down the line, obviously. And I asked him, I said, you come to Ohio State and you're behind a Heisman Trophy candidate in CJ Stroud, an established backup who's got experience with Kyle McCord. Like, what kind of patience does this take? And he said, it's just steady the boat is kind of the way that they look at it. Just go out every day, have a great day, get better, and stack one day on top of one another, and maybe one day you'll be regarded the way they're regarding CJ Stroud. So that's a good outlook, I think, for Devin Brown, and that we'll have plenty of time to get into who's going to be the quarterback in 2023. But I think 2022 is going to be a special year based on what I saw on Saturday. If the defense can make the kind of quantum leap, and last year they gave up almost 23 points a game, which is just almost unheard of. One of the worst per game numbers in the modern era of Ohio State football, probably among the top 5 worst all time, I would think, in Ohio State football history last year. There have been some other rough years, but that was a bad one. And I think that, they are going to, if they can get that back down around 14, 15, 16, where some of their better defenses have been, and even less than that in some great, great years, then you're talking about a team that could win it all. So that's what everyone's looking for, is to see, with Stroud and Smith-Njigba in their contract year, going to the NFL next year as top 10, top 15 draft picks, however they line up, maybe number 1 for Stroud. Can they get it done this year in 2022? That's what everyone's looking for. And that we're trying to stay on top of that every day. So there you go.
Folks, we've been here for 152 straight weeks, typically on Wednesday, but that's the reason why you subscribe and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Sometimes we've got to switch it up. So appreciate you being here. There's like 15 to 20 pretty big spring games on Saturday. So we're going to be all over the place with spring game coverage this Saturday. So hit that bell for the notifications. Kevin, appreciate you. Steve as well. You guys have a great week.